Okay.
So if someone's watching, they may have to refresh or go to another link on YouTube.
One of our mayors that's trying to listen in, so I just want to make sure.
I let Shane know.
Okay, hopefully we fixed our YouTube issue here. Okay, so I had a motion on the table to approve item I2. We need to amend it to say subject to legal review.
Subject to legal review is fine. That'll work. You said you wanted to walk it on. I don't know what that means.
No, you had an updated version that you're bringing forward today. I don't think that has any effect on the motion or anything. The final version of it is going to replace it in the packet is what you shared with the board this morning. And so that's what the board's taken action on. I don't think it requires a modification of the motion or anything else, because again, it's a corrected document that you submitted today. I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. That'll work.
Okay.
We got all that on the
I
record.
should be asking you this.
Well,
That
we
sounded
haven't.
like, I'll show you later.
Christian, want to weigh in?
We'll talk later.
It sounds like you approved the correct document that Jody had added into the packet. So if there isn't anything that requires additional review and approval, then again, I would look to Jody to make sure that that is the correct document that was the most recent one that's been submitted.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You see? Now, this is not right. She says should be, and this is like lawyer jargon over here. She's trying to cover. That's not right.
But that's,
Is it right or not?
The version that I sent today, as long as it's clear that on the record,
As
that's what we're
the-
approving.
but that's the first, that's law 101. There is no black and white. It's all gray.
Thank you.
I'm gonna
Thank
vote
you.
no.
The difference between shall and may, right, Counselor?
Yes. Okay,
Ish.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to revise my motion. I move.
Deny it, right?
I move approval of item I2, subject to the additional legal review and final version of the contract. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great. Thank you. That was quite painful. Hopefully the others are smoother. Okay. Item I3, consideration of approval of a deed and board order in the matter of declaring certain tax foreclosed property as surplus, authorizing the sale of the property by private sale, and ordering distribution of proceeds, tax lot number R3223-01600. So Jody, this is a property that is kind of a long sliver of a property in between two tax lots owned by the same person.
So we got an unsolicited bid back in, I want to say October, but last year, board accepted the bid. We sent them a letter and said, the bid, I believe, was for $0, but
Right.
for the recording fee.
Yeah.
So we sent them a letter and said, we'll need the recording fee before we can move forward with your deed, and we didn't hear back from him. Cut to recently, he was filing the paperwork necessary to combine that lot with his other lots. It came to his attention, oh, whoops, I forgot to do that. So that's why it's coming in front of you now. So it's just sort of an after the fact, checking the boxes that took longer than we thought it would.
And who was the previous owner?
Ooh,
I
can
thought he
look.
said it was a bank, but
Oh, I can double check that. Hold on.
This goes back to really old. Is it the 60s?
It was one of the oldest ones on our
Right.
list.
And I don't know that it was actually owned by a property owner adjacent?
It seems the parcel of land was assumed by the county after a local bank went out of business in the 1930s.
30s, okay.
Oh, wow.
So
It,
We're
it
just
looks
getting
like a
around to
long
it now.
strip. So it's possible it was a leftover after a lot line adjustment or something that happened.
So in terms of the whole Tyler versus Hennepin, we're not
No.
bumping
No,
up against
no.
anything like
We
that.
should be fine.
Okay.
It's not worth much anyway.
Hear that? Should,
Shall,
should,
May,
We shall be fine.
could,
not we are
we
good.
may be fine.
possibly.
Right.
Right. I think we've
We're
reached
more
the
than
limit.
covered.
Okay. Let's see, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. I4, consideration of approval of a memorandum of agreement between Yamhill County and the Bureau of Land Management, Oregon State Office to permit deputization of BLM law enforcement officers to enforce the laws of the state of Oregon and ordinances of the county of Yamhill on property owned or possessed by the United States government or as otherwise required per the MOU.
Chair, if we could
And-
ask,
And just to clarify, it's a memorandum of understanding, not an agreement. I don't think that's a big deal, but
Sheriff, do you want to come up?
I'll look
Again,
to
sorry.
legal to weigh in on that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, Commissioner Sterrett, you said you have questions.
just, thank you. I know this is pretty much processed, Sheriff, as far as I read what it entails. And I just want to make sure that for the record, we have put on the record exactly what this means and what it doesn't mean. Because I know that you are authorized to deputize anyone that you feel should be deputized. I mean, they don't need to be law enforcement in any other capacity so that you could just deputize someone. But in this particular case, it's for this specific application.
Correct. BLM, or the United States government, owns somewhere around 90,000 acres in Yamhill County. And like all law enforcement these days, their resources and capacity is extremely limited. They have one ranger who has been assigned to Yamhill and Tillamook counties. And our partnership with BLM goes back a number of years. And essentially, we're just, the goal of the MOU and the intent would be to provide those rangers that work on BLM land in Yamhill County with some additional tools to address the problems that they encounter up in those remote areas.
Okay, thank you.
Did you say, do they get to wear a badge?
We could be deputies.
Oh,
Yeah, we can. That's what I was kind of,
red flags are going off.
I was kind of angling for that. I mean, we have a sweatshirt, we might as well be deputies.
We do have
Yep.
cool sweatshirts.
Sheriff, before you consider appointing Jody as a deputy, we should probably talk.
Objections?
No,
He
thank
actually
you.
denied it.
No, thank you.
Which was weird, but.
Okay. I will move approval of the MOU or memorandum of agreement. Is there further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more for the sheriff here. Item I5 is discussion regarding the Lexipol Master Service Agreement. And I added this to our agenda after a conversation with the sheriff regarding the need to update internal policies and how we go about doing that expeditiously, but also with the lowest possible cost and impact to our staff. And I don't know, do you have the contract? Does everybody have
have
the
it.
contract? Okay.
You want to?
So we have the contract in front of us, Sheriff, but if you want to maybe just give us a brief overview of what this looks like.
So we have a need, obviously, to keep internal policy current and in following with best practices and case law. And as you know, there have been a number of legislative changes just in the state of Oregon in the last few years that directly affect law enforcement. There's probably even more case law that has been implemented through both the state of Oregon as well as the Ninth Circuit and other circuits in the United States that directly affect how law enforcement can go do their job on the street. The agreement in front of you is the result of discussions with Lexipol. Lexipol is an entity that really their sole function is law enforcement policy. They have staff attorneys that are constantly reviewing and digesting case law decisions and reviewing legislative changes so that they incorporate those changes into policy. Subscribing offices or agencies receive those updates regularly through the portal, is the way I'll describe it. Each staff member of the office has their own account, so to speak, and they log in every day. They get automatic updates as to any potential change in policy. And there's also time periods where they're assigned to read specific chapters of the policy just as a regular update and keeping proficient with understanding what policy is. And that is able to track when staff read and review either changes or just the regular review. We do an annual review of policy just to keep staff refreshed on what policy says. And this mechanism allows us to go in and look at each individual employee. We can see when they reviewed. They have to sign that they have reviewed the policy, and it maintains all of that tracking within Lexipol itself. In order for us to update our entire policy in-house would require a significant amount of time, both from sheriff's office personnel, but also from county council, because we would be relying on them to review all of the applicable case law and legislative changes to ensure that policy is in keeping with the intent of those legislative changes or with case law. 30 of 36 sheriff's offices in the state of Oregon are now Lexipol subscribers. They are working very closely with Oregon State Sheriff's Association to make sure that how they roll out and implement policy is in cooperation with what OSSA is doing and what sheriff's offices across the state are doing. They are able to work with the individual agency. So Yamhill County, if we were to subscribe to Lexipol, it's not just a canned, they send it to you and that's what it is. We actually have to review it. We provide feedback. It can be custom tailored to the county, to our office specifically, because policing in Yamhill County is different than policing in Malheur County or in Multnomah County. And so there is a review for the implementation that allows us to provide feedback and input and obviously work with county council in making sure that any other county policy that we may want to include in our internal sheriff's office policy is that they're all in keeping with each other. So this would be essentially an opportunity for us to completely go through our entire office policy manual, ensure that it is current. Policy really is a living document when you're talking about law enforcement policy, because it has to keep up with those changes in order for us to be able to have those bright lines that we can operate within, and also to have accountability with our staff when they're outside of that policy.
I think this is critical, just given the environment that law enforcement has been sort of forced to operate under in this state over recent years. It's becoming more and more difficult. So to make sure that we have first of all, a thorough understanding of the laws that your department has to follow, but just a high level of professionalism and standards is so important. And it sounds like, so this is specific to patrol or not the jail, but patrol specifically.
So there are chapters of the policy that apply to all staff. They apply to the jail, they apply to patrol. You're talking about structure the chain of command, so to speak. You're talking about code of conduct. You're talking about on and off duty behavior. And then there are the tiers as they're listed in the descriptions, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, 4, 5. Those are the ones that are patrol specific. And so tier 1 would be your high liability events like motor vehicle pursuits, use of force. And then the further you go down, the less liability those particular subject matters are. So this does apply to all staff for some of the chapters of the policy manual, and then it applies just to patrol for some of the chapters of the manual. Jail has its own separate policy. The jail policy has been reviewed and refreshed much more recently, and there is a lot more available assistance and guidance and templates through Oregon State Sheriff's Association, the Oregon Jail Standards. There is a lot of information already out there, and those are updated regularly. So upon review of our jail policy really is in good shape right now, and those are just the jail specific chapters.
Okay. And I think, so this covers 46 law enforcement officers, sworn officers.
For
And-
those tier 1 to 5 patrol related. And then the language that talks about code of conduct and the office wide, those are, you don't have to have a separate subscription for that to apply to the corrections staff and non-sworn staff.
Okay. But just on a cost basis, I mean, we're looking at, basically under $1,000 per sworn officer to develop policy that's going to inform best practices and not just protect them, but protect the public as well. So I think when we look at something like that, we should consider the benefit of incorporating all of this, the legal aspect of producing all of this, the interaction with the sheriff and his department, the staff time that it would require. Seems like this is a pretty big bang for our buck. And certainly if 30 of 36 counties are using this, then, there's history here that has proven that this is a good way to go.
I would wholeheartedly agree. And the counties that typically aren't Lexipol subscribers are your very large counties, and they have assigned counsel for the sheriff's office specifically.
Okay.
The initial cost, it is a consideration because of the initial implementation. And it is roughly $1,000 if you're talking just enforcement. If you include the jail, when you talk about those policies that encompass the entire office, it drops to more like $600 per employee. And then the ongoing maintenance annual subscription, you're talking about like $163 per staff member to get those regular updates that are assigned and tracked, as well as the immediate updates when there's case law or legislative change that policy has to be updated and implemented immediately.
Sheriff, just from what you know, and maybe county council can weigh in on this, in terms of your involvement and how many times you're brought into discussions or having to review updated policies or updated legislation, just trying to look at the cost compared to what this would be. So county council's time obviously is time that needs to be factored into this.
Yeah, and I met with the sheriff and part of his team last week, and we talked about this, and I would agree with the sheriff that, if we have a set of standardized policies that a vast majority of counties in Oregon are already using, there is no need to reinvent the wheel and go through an entire policy drafting process of our own. And so when we talked, I think, Sam, you had mentioned Lexipol had estimated maybe a 6 to a 12-month timeframe in which to get all this implemented. Obviously, we'll work with the sheriff to try and get this wrapped up as quickly as possible, hopefully closer to the 6-month timeframe than the 12-month timeframe. And you'd also mentioned that they do have kind of a tiered approach, that they work with you to implement the most critical health and safety related policies right away. So that's great. And so, yeah, we will certainly do what we can to make sure that this gets moved on the timeline that the sheriff is interested in. And I think you'd also mentioned that they have like, maybe it's weekly meetings to try and make sure that everyone's clear on these are the policies we're, working on this week, and ticking through that list on a week by week basis, which I think would be also very helpful in terms of making sure we stay on track.
Yeah, just trying to get on the record that this basically takes funding that we would have had to utilize coming from your office, and it's basically, we're not doubling up. In other words, you're not going to have to deal with this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with the sheriff in the past, and still do, to update different types of policies all the time. There have been some recent updates to the corrections side of the policies, and I think that's an example, as the sheriff has spoken to, that's why there isn't at the moment the need or the urgency to sort of bring on Lexipol to update those policies. So yeah, we will continue to work with them during this process, and if necessary after the process, to make sure that it's up to date. But yeah, this will certainly save a significant amount of staff time, other than if we had to, go in and start reviewing all their existing documents, reviewing other existing policies, and then drafting new policies of our own. So I expect it will be much more efficient.
That's what I was getting at. Thank you.
How out of date are we?
It depends, but anywhere from 14, 15 years on some policies to there's some that, we've had to revise just in the last few months because of legislative change.
Have
And
you,
just to clarify, when you say out of date, I don't know if that equates to sort of out of compliance. I think it's just the fact that these haven't been updated, and while they're still functional, they're still workable policies. It is always best practice to review and update those more frequently than that.
and knowing how stretched thin that your office is now, this seems like something that can be pulled off of your guys' plate. My next question was going to be is how much input, if we didn't do this, how much input does the sheriff's office have putting together the new policies or updated policies? And then does Christian just review that? Or is Christian putting all of this together start to finish with information you're feeding to him? I'm trying to get cost wise of what would be on the sheriff's department and then cost of what would be in Christian's office.
The initial work would be on my office. I would probably be looking to other sheriff's offices to get their current policies, looking at what our policy says, and then trying to match up our policy with what other sheriff's offices and other law enforcement agencies are doing in the state. And then it would go to Christian's office for them to review for that legal review, and make sure that there are other things that I may not be aware of when it comes to case law, and making sure that we're in compliance that way. So it would be basically me putting together the draft, and then it would go to Christian's office for review. And then if there's any adjustments, it would come back to me, and then it would go back to him, and then we would probably have a finished product.
And I think that has been the way in which it has generally been done historically as well. So that wouldn't be a change. We would work closely with the sheriff's office, but of course we would want to make sure that they've had the necessary time to input and review that, to make sure that the ultimate policy reflects what they need and want.
And is up to date. Because right now for 15
Absolutely.
some things, it seems like we're more reactive than actually being proactive about keeping it updated or not.
No, I would just echo what Christian was saying, that sometimes, yeah, there's a legislative change that may come down, because this practice isn't exclusive to the sheriff's office. It's the departments that have departmental policies. So exactly like what Christian was saying, a policy might be 15 years old, but as long as it's still current, and, a lot of times we're reactive because maybe there's case law, maybe there's new legislation, maybe the board adopts a county policy that changes, that puts a departmental policy out of alignment. And then that's usually where we get reactive to make sure we get in there and up, to change those to make sure that we're still consistent.
Have we had any scenarios where because we weren't up to date, that it ended up costing us more money? Because our policy wasn't up to date?
I'll defer to council.
I mean, if you're talking specifically to the sheriff's office policies, yeah, I would have to connect with Sam and we could think about that. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of a situation where we ran into a issue that was something that cost the county more money because of a specific policy that was out of compliance. But
Still good
I can
practice.
think more about that.
I will say that when you're looking at it from a cost, because, at least law enforcement has the luxury that they have a Lexipol, not all the other department. We don't have that kind of vendor to go to and a source to go to help with that. And I know.
And the State Sheriff's Association is always very good about, I think, communicating updates and needed changes down to the county offices.
Right. But I would say, I think one of the challenges that you have is kind of balancing the staffing requirements and things. We would love to have dedicated, just kind of pouring through and updating policies on a set schedule and doing that. And I think what this helps is when you have that, when you're dealing with priorities and kind of working on other areas, it's really hard to continue on that schedule for those updates. A system like this helps do that for you instead of, and I think where some of the cost savings comes into play is, when you're in a constant state of bargaining, or you're working on other priorities, or working in other areas, and then your policy updates can snowball to a certain degree. And then that's usually where it hurts, because then we realize we really need to update this policy manual and dive into it.
Yep.
And something like this, just looking long-term operational, if you're getting these updates and they're coming out, it's helping you're spending time reviewing updates instead of updating the entire policy manual.
And gives you more time to focus on keeping the county safe.
Correct.
Budget-wise, is this something you can just pencil in at this point? How are you going to be able to absorb this? I know we've got some challenges budget-wise.
I don't have a high degree of confidence that I could absorb the initial implementation right now. I can absorb the annual ongoing subscription. So the initial cost, which is the actual implementation, so reviewing everything, making sure it's updated and pushing it out. And then it's prorated to get to the end of June for this year. And so beginning July 1, I would be able to incorporate that annual subscription into my budget. I don't believe that I can incorporate the initial implementation right now.
When would this start?
As soon as we were able to send some signed documents back and forth.
Yesterday.
Mhm.
I think that's what that was.
So,
So we talked about potential
'cause-
funding.
So based on this, I believe the board has two requests kind of before you. One is, which is probably the first, I'm going to do it in reverse order, but the first one is you have the Lexipol contract, seeking approval on that. But then the second part is there is a funding request to help with year one of the implementation costs of the project. So that's two separate items. So I would probably recommend the discussion on the funding portion of it. And then you can take action on the contract.
Okay, so.
And real quick, speaking to the contract piece, I confirmed with Jody, neither of us have had a chance to review this contract. I think it was a relatively late add to the agenda. And the packet contains part of the contract, but it doesn't look like it contains the entire agreement. So if the board's ready to act and certainly have the discussion, what I would recommend is that the contract be approved subject to the final review and approval of county counsel's office. And then at least we'll have the board action piece, and then Sam and I can work together to make sure that the contract is finalized. I don't, it looks like much of it is there. So I don't expect that there would be a lot of additional material terms that aren't already in the packet that would be added. The other step would, or the other option would be to, on the agenda today, it talks about having a discussion about Lexipol. If we wanted to set this over for another week, we could probably have the contract fully reviewed and ready for the board to consider at next week's meeting. I don't know if that does anything timing wise for you, Sam. If approving it this week would be more obviously quicker is better, but would it fit into your time frame and plans if it came back to the board next week? Okay. I think I saw you nod yes, but you're pretty small on my screen.
Well, before we approve the contract and kind of jump into that, I think we need to talk about the funding.
There's that too, yeah.
So if we
Okay.
want to talk about the funding now and
Yep.
then,
That's where my mind's
How do
going.
these discounts end up coming into play? Is it based on like volume, how many implementations that we had to do? I see there's 20% discount on the LE, 10% discount on the annual subscription. If we did a 3-year contract, would they blend all of this to soften the budget below over 3 years? Like basically get a total number here, divide it by 3, and then maybe the discount, obviously, maybe they'd be more reasonable to discount a little bit more if we did a 3-year versus a 1-year.
I would just have to go back to the representative and discuss that option with them.
Sounds like it's, considerable amount of time that they're putting into setting this up for us, so I don't think it's
But
unreasonable to ask
and it's
for,
also subject to a price agreement, correct? Because isn't
Yeah.
this off the source well?
It is a Sourcewell agreement.
oh, and that's where that discount comes in then.
I don't know if that's where the discount comes from, but I know that based on what you had shared earlier, that this was tied to Sourcewell. So I'm looking at council across the way of if it's.
Yeah, it's a statewide price agreement or a cooperative purchasing agreement, so we don't need to do any further additional solicitation or procurement. We can buy directly off of those contracts. If that was what you were getting at, Ken or Commissioner.
Well, there were some questions around the pricing and the.
Yeah,
And
and I would have to look at the
There because of
price
source.
agreement to see whether those are covered specifically there. Usually they do try to ensure that there's consistent pricing for anyone who is, who chooses to purchase under those agreements. But that's something that I can easily work with the sheriff's office to make sure that we're getting whatever the available discounts are under those agreements.
yeah, it looks like the discount is because of the Sourcewell. It's a prorate from Sourcewell. Okay, so funding options, we talked about maybe 3 different options if we are to fund the implementation and then have the sheriff's budget take over the annual subscription cost. Insurance reserve was mentioned as a possibility.
I'd probably, even though I can see the connection with the insurance reserve, my recommendation would either be landfill license reserve or ONC, one of those 2 funds instead of the insurance reserve. For this way, it's a one-time cost, a one-time project to implement. And we have funds available because what was the total price? 46?
42, 383.70.
Right.
Do we have vastly different balances in each of those accounts or?
No, we have almost, we have 479,000 available in ONC for one-time projects. So and you may recall this is kind of the same one where we funded the parks master plan, and there's other one-time projects that we've done. It seems like this would be a good source to do this.
Out of ONC?
ONC would be my recommendation. Or if you don't have a specific fund, because it's appropriated, it doesn't really require, specific board action. You can just, if the board wants to pay for this in another section of the budget, I don't think it requires any other action. You can just give me direction and I can make sure. Send me I'll provide the coding for the invoice and I can look at ONC, I can look at landfill license reserve or a combination thereof. We have funds appropriated, so I don't think it requires any board action. I think the only thing I'd be looking at is if there's consensus to pay for this out of the budget. Sorry, I'm thinking about this on the fly. If you're okay with going forward with the project, even though you haven't taken action on the project, but if you want me to find the funds in another portion of the budget so the sheriff's not paying for it at a 1041 or 1043, I'll get it paid for.
Okay.
Okay, but it would be one of those three. It would be landfill license, ONC, or insurance reserve.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with leaving it up to your discretion to find the best fit.
Okay, well, I will move approval of the Lexipol Master Service Agreement subject to final approval by county council on the final contract. And have Ken, fund the initial investment through, one of the accounts that he mentioned. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah.
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sheriff, for
Sheriff.
joining us.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Okay, let's see. Item I6 is discussion regarding EECBG program application. This is something I added. It's regarding the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. I got an email from Gina Nickel from AOC that Marion, Polk, and Yamhill County had not applied for their funds yet. However, I am awaiting a response to an email, so I can't really provide any further information at this point. So I'm going to push it to next week. We can talk about whether or not we want to look at accepting the grant funds, if that's okay.
Is there a deadline for it?
April 30th, end of April.
So do you have to have earmarked projects by the
That's,
time you
those are some
apply?
of my questions.
Okay.
There's a set dollar amount for each county. We
Right.
just have to say, yes, we want to accept it. So I want to make sure we have some ideas on what we would use that for. But I had some further questions. So I will bring that back next week.
Okay.
And then I have an add-on today. It's a letter to the Oregon Board of Forestry, to the attention of the state forester, Cal Mokomoto. I believe we all met Cal at our District 6 meeting at the end of last year. He was there talking about some other issues. But essentially, the Board of Forestry has extended the public comment period for the decision on the Habitat Conservation Plan. This is a plan that extends 70 years, and the current plan as being implemented would reduce timber harvest by about 34%, which is going to be devastating for our neighboring counties especially. We've heard some of the commissioners from those counties speak about this in our AOC meetings. They're very concerned about what is going to happen to their communities. And so this letter is meant to be testimony on behalf of the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners in encouragement of the Oregon Board of Forestry to go back to the table and put forward a plan that is not going to be so devastating to working families in those rural communities. Commissioners, have you had a chance to read the letter?
Yes, and thank you for writing it, Chair. It was pointed and it was, I think it's important that we send it.
Agreed.
Okay, testimony is due tomorrow, so I will go ahead and try and fire this off today. I believe it's just an email, so we'll get this submitted today within the deadline. So I will move approval of the letter of testimony regarding the Habitat Conservation Plan. Is there further discussion?
None.
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Motion passes. And I think that brings us to the end of the other business. Item J is public hearings. There's nothing today. And announcements. Any announcements?
Chair, I met with Newburgh Police Chief Jeff Kosmicki, and he had some concerns and questions about Yamhill County Transit as it relates to some of the crime issues that they're addressing in their staff. And I believe that Commissioner Johnston is going to be following up with him, since that's his liaison is transit, and met yesterday with Lafayette Mayor and the city manager regarding hiring and retention in Yamhill County because of the concerns over funding for housing. So we talked about the way the county can get involved to help streamline some of the red tape around zoning and permits and things like that. So we'll be following up in, it's been a collaboration of county mayors, and just want to see how we can get involved.
Commissioner, can I clarify just the transit discussion? It's not transit as a whole, it's the riders on transit that are raising the concern.
Oh,
I just kind of want to clarify that it's not.
yeah, it's not our fault that there are bad actors getting on the bus.
Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you.
Okay, so that hot potato has been handed to you.
I could take it.
I only have one announcement. I attended the swearing in ceremony for Chief Reed Godfrey, the new McMinnville Fire District Chief, last Friday. And it was a packed room, and boy, he's ready to hit the ground running. He's got a plan, and he was,
Been running.
yeah, he was a great choice.
Yep.
So very proud of that. Announcements?
Fair Board got their 2 new members.
Oh, yeah.
So we increased from 5 to 7. So we welcomed Janet and Scott last week, which was good because there was a couple people absent. And they announced, it almost seems too soon to be announcing the talent that's coming to the fair, but it sounds like Smash Mouth for sure. And what's the other one, Lindsay?
Sir Mix-a-Lot.
Mix-a-Lot.
Do you
Uh,
know,
and-
my husband, the smile on his face when I said that, it was ridiculous.
And then there's still a third that we're working on. But that's where we're at right now. I wouldn't hold your breath on it. I mean, they said it's signed, contract and done, but things can change. I know that sometimes when you book talent and somebody gets sick, that it ends up getting canceled. I know we had one last year that happened that
Yeah.
way. So, but
Well, there has to
This-
be a country singer.
they have not, they're trying, price wise, they have to balance.
Okay.
So they're still going for their high ticket one right now.
Okay.
And
I would
TBD.
vote for the Bee Gees.
heck yeah.
You think what's left of the Bee Gees?
Can we all like just write a letter to the Fair Board
Yeah, 'cause
recommending?
I don't even know who those people are,
And Ken will find the funding and
and we'll just take it out of
and
general
the
fund.
insurance reserve. It's gonna take
ONC.
multiple funds for that. It's
Right.
gonna be, yeah.
Right. Bee Gees it
Yeah.
is.
Okay.
Yeah. My stepdaughter is 17 and she didn't recognize the names, but when he started singing the song, she's like, oh yeah, I know that song. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Hmm.
Sir Mix-a-Lot. All right.
Something like that.
Any further announcements?
We'll have to have extra sheriff patrols on the Sir
Yep,
Mix-a-Lot night.
That's right. Uh, Okay, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, I will adjourn the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for February 1st, 2024. It is 11, does that say 55? 11:55.